It always starts quietly, not with thunder or fireworks, just a shift, barely noticeable at first. You stop laughing at the jokes that once distracted you. The conversations you once lived for begin to feel hollow. You find yourself staring out windows longer than you used to, feeling something stir beneath the surface that you can't quite name. You used to fill silence with noise. Now you sit in it. You used to chase belonging. Now you question why you ever had to. Something inside you is awakening. And while you imagined this journey would be full of light, clarity, and liberation, it's lonelier than you expected. The people you once confided in now seem distant. The spaces you once felt safe in now feel tight. You begin to wonder if you're broken, if your heart is growing colder. But you're not growing cold, you're growing conscious. And that's why your relationships begin to change. You're no longer resonating with the people who fed off your unconscious version. The version of you that tolerated smallness, that chased approval, that sacrificed peace for acceptance. And when that version begins to dissolve, the first thing you notice is who disappears. But something else happens too. As you awaken, you start to attract new energy. Not always in the form you expect. Not always wrapped in kindness or safety, but always with purpose. And the first type of person you attract? The one who tests your awakening. They won't announce themselves. In fact, they might feel like a gift when they arrive. You meet them and think, finally, someone who understands. They're magnetic, intense, deeply drawn to your shift because your energy feels alive. You're breaking out of the matrix and they're intoxicated by that fire. But very quickly, you'll feel the edge. Because they're not here to walk with you. They're here to challenge everything you say you've learned. When you say, I choose peace, they'll provoke you into conflict. When you say, I value honesty, they'll test your ability to hold your truth. When you say, I'm done betraying myself, they'll tempt you to do exactly that. They're not malicious. They're mirrors. Their presence asks one question. Have you really changed? Or are you just wearing a new mask? You'll know you've met this person when your old wounds start whispering again. You swore you'd never chase love again. But here you are refreshing your inbox, aching for their validation. You promised yourself you wouldn't dim your light, but you find yourself quieting your truth just to keep the peace. You thought you were free, but somehow you feel caught all over again. This isn't regression, it's refinement. Because this person, the one who tests your awakening, brings every old pattern to the surface not to punish you, but to invite you into mastery. You won't heal in the absence of triggers. You will heal in their presence, when you respond differently than you used to. And when you finally look at this person and say, no more, not with rage but with clarity, not from fear but from love, they'll fade. They came for the version of you that once needed them. And when that version no longer runs the show, they'll lose interest, where they'll try harder to stay. But you'll feel something far stronger than victory. You'll feel your own alignment. And after they leave, you'll sit in the silence they once filled. And for the first time, it won't feel empty. It will feel sacred. Then someone else will appear. You'll recognize them not by how loud they are, but by how safe it feels to be around them. They are the second person you attract. The one who reflects your healing. They don't flatter you. They see you. They don't chase you. They meet you. There's no rush in their presence. No need to impress. No game to win. With them, you feel strangely whole, like you don't have to explain why you've become quieter, why you don't enjoy the same things, or why you've stopped trying to be the center of every room. They nod when you say you're tired, not of work, but of noise. They ask questions that matter, not to pry but to understand. They hold silence with you, not awkwardly, but like it's a language you both remember from somewhere else. And slowly you realize, this is what resonance feels like. Not adrenaline, not butterflies, but a deep exhale. The first time you laugh with them, it doesn't feel like escape. It feels like return. And yet, this person won't always stay forever either. Sometimes they do. But often, they are a bridge, here to remind you that you are not alone in your becoming. That you are capable of being loved in your truth. That your new frequency isn't too much or too little. It's just honest. They reflect back to you how far you've come. And when they leave, it won't be with chaos. It will be with reverence. Because they didn't come to fix you. They came to affirm you. They remind you of something you forgot. You don't have to perform to be worthy of connection. And just when you've begun to believe in that again, you'll meet the third person. You weren't expecting them. They arrived without warning. Maybe in a grocery line, or a late-night message from someone you hadn't spoken to in years. At first glance, they didn't seem extraordinary. They weren't loud. They didn't glow. But something about them unsettled you. They are the third person you attract when you begin awakening. The one who triggers your deepest shadow. They don't do it on purpose. In fact, they may not even be aware of what they stir in you. But something about their presence awakens the part of you that still lives in fear, the part you thought you had already healed. With them, it's not fireworks or euphoria. It's discomfort. Not because they harm you, but because they challenge the final layer of your old self. The part still hiding behind awareness, still resisting transformation. Maybe they remind you of someone from your past. Not in looks, but in energy. The way they withdraw when they're overwhelmed. The way they listen so carefully you feel exposed. The way they question you, not to shame, but to ask, is that really your truth, or just your protection? They make you aware of the parts of you that still flinch. You want to run, but you don't, because this time your awareness stops you. Something tells you, don't look away. There's something here you need to see, not in them, in yourself. You find yourself wrestling with things you thought you'd outgrown. Insecurity, judgment, the urge to perform. You start watching yourself again. Curating your words, analyzing their silences, retreating into old stories about not being enough. And that's when it hits you. This person didn't create your pain. They revealed it. And in doing so, they offer you a final invitation. Can you hold your own shadow without projecting it onto someone else? Can you feel the rise of jealousy, shame, or fear, and not collapse into it, but question it? Can you stay present in the discomfort long enough to understand what it's trying to teach you? This person is not your enemy. They are your mirror. But here's the paradox. The more you project onto them, the more distant they feel. Not because they're unkind, but because your fear creates walls. And if you're not careful, you'll repeat the same cycle, believing they've hurt you, when in truth, they've only revealed where you've been hurting yourself. You may try to push them away. You might convince yourself they don't understand, or that they're not safe enough. But a deeper part of you knows the truth. They're not here to coddle you. They're here to reflect your blind spots, so you can meet yourself fully. And when you do, when you stop blaming, start owning, and begin holding space for the very emotions you once ran from, something shifts. The dynamic softens, not because they changed, but because you did. That's when you see them clearly, not through the lens of fear, but of truth. And whether they stay or go becomes irrelevant, because the gift has already been given. You no longer abandon yourself when your shadow appears. But this isn't about just one person, because as you continue awakening, you'll begin to recognize these three types everywhere. The tester, the reflector, the revealer, not in obvious costumes, but in quiet interactions. A coworker who pushes your boundaries. A friend who meets you in your silence. A stranger who says something that cracks open your chest. Awakening doesn't isolate you, it refines your vision. You no longer see people as good or bad, right or wrong, toxic or perfect. You see them as teachers, and you stop expecting permanence. You begin to honor the sacred contract between souls. We meet, we exchange energy, and we move on if our lessons are complete. And here's the most important thing you'll learn. None of these people are more powerful than your response to them. The one who tests you only succeeds when you forget your growth. The one who reflects you only strengthens what you already carry. The one who reveals your shadow only hurts you if you refuse to look. But when you stay conscious, every interaction becomes alchemy. You take the trigger and turn it into insight. You take the silence and turn it into presence. You take the projection and turn it into compassion. And slowly, you stop reacting, you begin responding. The awakening deepens, not because life becomes easier, but because you become more honest. You no longer perform enlightenment. You embody it, and people feel that. They're drawn to your presence, not because it shines, but because it's real. You become the one others are drawn to during their awakening. You become the mirror, the test, the reflection. But you don't carry their healing, you simply hold the space for it. And that's the beauty of this journey. First, it feels like loss, but eventually, it becomes love, love that's rooted not in attachment, but in awareness. And in that awareness, you finally understand. You weren't meant to find your people in the conventional sense. You were meant to become the kind of person who attracts what aligns with your truth. Not out of need, but out of resonance. Not out of performance, but out of presence. So, the next time someone enters your life and unsettles something in you, pause. Ask yourself which lesson is here. Which version of me is being invited to evolve? Because the ones you attract are not accidents. They're reflections of your current frequency. And as your frequency rises, so will the caliber of connections. And eventually, you won't just attract the ones who challenge you. You'll attract the ones who walk with you, side by side, shadow and light, without fear, without masks, just truth. There's something sacred about this part of the path. It doesn't shout, it hums, quiet, steady, like the rhythm of your own breath when you finally sit still enough to hear it. And maybe for the first time, you stop searching for the next arrival, the next test, the next mirror, the next reckoning. Because something has shifted. You've begun attracting someone new. Not because you're seeking them out, but because you've become someone who no longer hides. This final kind of person doesn't arrive with intensity. They don't knock you off your center. They don't sweep you into the chaos of will they stay? Or, do I have to become smaller to keep them? They don't demand healing. They make healing feel safe. They are the ones who meet you as you are. Not the you you've curated. Not the version that earns approval or attention, but the raw, honest, unfinished you. The you that still has questions. The you that's learning to hold both light and shadow with equal reverence. You don't have to impress them. You don't have to translate your soul into simpler language. When you speak, they don't just hear your words. They feel the energy beneath them. They don't flinch when you say, "I'm still healing." They nod as if to say, "Me too." There's a sense of peace in their presence. Not because they're perfect, but because they're anchored. You're not tiptoeing around landmines anymore. You're not decoding mixed signals, playing games of emotional hide and seek. You're just being. And maybe for a while that stillness feels strange, like sitting in a quiet room after years of noise. Your nervous system, so conditioned to scan for danger, keeps asking, "Where's the trap?" But there isn't one, because you're no longer in survival mode. You're in presence. You laugh, not to deflect tension, but because joy comes easier now. You cry, and they stay, not to fix you, but to witness you. They ask, "How are you?" and mean it. And when you tell them the truth, they don't shrink away. You realize, they're not here to complete you. They're here to walk beside you. You talk about your dreams, and they don't compete or compare. They listen. They ask, "What do you need to make it real?" Not out of obligation, but because they see you. You begin to rewrite the meaning of connection, not as something that demands performance, but as something that deepens your presence. And with them, you no longer feel like a project. You feel like a person. But here's what might surprise you most. They don't arrive to save you. They arrive when you've already started saving yourself. You met the test. You faced the mirror. You stood still with your shadow and didn't run. And in doing so, you created a signal, a frequency, one that called to them, not from your wounds, but from your wholeness. This is why they don't pull you out of the darkness. They sit down in it with you and light a candle. They don't fix your cracks. They trace them with reverence. They don't promise to stay forever, but they offer presence. Full, honest, undiluted while they're here. And the irony? You no longer need the promise of forever to feel safe. Because you're no longer anchored in fear. You've begun to trust yourself. Not because you've figured everything out, but because you've learned how to stay with yourself in discomfort through transition. And when you can stay with yourself, You no longer chase others to avoid your own silence. You stop needing love to be dramatic to believe it's real. You stop confusing adrenaline with alignment. You stop tolerating relationships that ask you to split yourself in two just to be tolerated. You understand that peace is not boring. It's revolutionary. You understand that soft is not weak. It's powerful. You understand that love doesn't demand sacrifice. It invites presence. This person you've attracted, whether they become a lifelong partner, a sacred friend, or a chapter in your unfolding, is not your destination. They are a reflection of how far you've come. They don't complete your awakening. They confirm it. You realize with a quiet kind of gratitude that awakening isn't something that happens once. It's not a lightning strike or a singular event. It's a process, a return, a remembering, and it doesn't end. You will still be triggered. You will still forget. You will still meet people who rattle your core. But now you'll respond differently. Not because you've become numb, but because you've become aware. You'll know the difference between a test and a truth. You'll know the feeling of alignment, how it hums, not streams. You'll stop looking for fireworks and start listening for resonance. You'll stop proving and start being. And the more you return to that place within, the one that isn't striving or pretending, the more you'll attract people who do the same. That's the gift of awakening. Not that it makes life easier, but that it makes you clearer. And with that clarity, you stop attracting people based on your wounds, and start drawing in those who meet you in your worth. So if you're here, reading these words, nodding quietly, it means something in you already knows. You're not broken. You're blooming. And the people who arrive now, they're not distractions. They're not detours. They're reflections of your becoming. They found you not because you were loud or perfect or impressive, but because you were honest. You chose presence over performance. And in that choice, the world shifted. So, here's your reminder. Stay soft even when it feels risky. Stay grounded even when the old patterns whisper. Stay open even when it's unfamiliar. Because the people who meet you in that space, they won't need you to shrink. They'll remind you how much room you were always allowed to take up. And that maybe is the deepest awakening of all.